Hey everyone, welcome back to Lore to Snore. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, if you're getting comfortable for a journey into ancient myths and timeless gifts, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you drift off somewhere between Earth and Olympus, well, that's exactly what we're here for. But I'd love to know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now let me tell you about the story waiting for you. Tonight we're traveling back to the very beginning, to a time of twilight when humanity huddled in caves without warmth or light. We're going to walk alongside a titan who looked down from the heights of Olympus and saw not weakness, but possibility, not dependence, but the seed of something extraordinary. This is a story about a gift stolen from heaven, about a choice made in compassion that would echo through eternity, about the price one being paid so that countless others could thrive, and about the small, persistent flame of hope that refuses to die, even in the deepest darkness. This isn't just about fire. It's about what we're willing to sacrifice for those we love. It's about defiance that looks like devotion and suffering that becomes, somehow, a kind of freedom. So find your most comfortable position. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's climb together toward Olympus. Then descend with stolen flame to the world below. In the beginning, before the first spark touched mortal hands, the world rested in a quiet twilight. Not quite darkness, not quite day. This was the time when humanity first opened its eyes beneath a sky of silver stars, shaped gently by the hands of two Titan brothers, Prometheus, whose name means forethought, and Prometheus, whose name whispers afterthought. These were the days when the gods dwelt high on Mount Olympus, their halls gleaming with immortal light, while below, on the cooling earth, humankind huddled in caves and beneath sheltering trees. The mortals had been fashioned with care. Prometheus himself had molded them from clay and water, breathing into each form a spark of potential. But they were vulnerable creatures, without the natural armor of beasts, without fur to warm them or claws to defend them. Prometheus, in his generous haste, had already distributed gifts to all the animals of the earth. To the lion went strength and proud mane. To the bird went wings and song. To the fish went scales that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Each creature received some protection, some advantage in the struggle of existence. But when Prometheus reached the end of his giving, he discovered with dismay that nothing remained for humanity. They stood bare and trembling in the cool dusk, their eyes wide with wonder, their hands empty. Prometheus walked among them in those early days, and his heart grew heavy. He watched them gather in small groups as darkness fell, saw how they pressed close to one another for warmth, heard the soft sounds of their voices rising into the evening air. They had language, that gift he had given them, and with it they shared their fears and dreams, told stories to comfort one another through the long, cold nights. But without fire, they could not truly thrive. They ate their food raw and unseasoned, tasting only the plainness of root and grain. When night descended fully, they could not push back the shadows, could not see the dangers that circled in the darkness. They could not work metal, could not forge tools beyond the simplest stone and wood. And when winter came with its bitter winds, they suffered terribly, their bodies shaking, their lips turning pale as they huddled together in desperate attempts to preserve what warmth they possessed. Prometheus would sit on a hillside above their settlements, watching the smoke rise from Olympus where the gods feasted by hearthlight, where golden flames danced in bronze braziers, casting warm shadows on marble walls. The gods had fire, that precious element, that bridge between raw nature and civilization. They guarded it jealously, knowing its power to transform, to elevate, to illuminate the darkness of ignorance. The Titan's thoughts moved slowly and deeply, like great underground rivers seeking their course. He understood what Zeus, the king of gods, had decreed, that fire must remain the province of the divine, that mortals must remain in their twilight state, dependent and small. Zeus saw order in this arrangement, a hierarchy as natural as the layering of earth, sea, and sky. The gods above, radiant and eternal, humanity below, brief and humble in their mortality. But Prometheus saw something else when he looked upon the humans. He saw not weakness, but possibility. He saw not dependence, but the potential for independence. In their eyes, dark and searching in the dim light, he recognized a hunger that went beyond the need for warmth or cooked food. They hungered for understanding, for the ability to shape their world, to leave their mark upon existence before their brief lives flickered out. Night after night, he watched them. He saw mothers trying to soothe crying children through cold darkness. He saw young ones peering into tide pools and up at stars, asking wordless questions about the nature of things. He saw old ones, their faces lined with care, attempting to pass on hard-won knowledge before death claimed them. And in all of this, he saw dignity and courage. The courage simply to continue, to wake each morning and face another day of struggle. There were moments of beauty, even in their hardship. When the moon rose full and bright, the humans would sometimes gather in clearings and sing together, their voices rising and falling in harmonies they invented from nothing but feeling. When a child was born, they would celebrate with gentle ceremony, welcoming new life with touching solemnity. They cared for their sick and mourned their dead with genuine grief. They were, in their way, noble, and Prometheus loved them for it. The Titan found himself at a crossroads. On one side lay obedience to Zeus, loyalty to the divine order, the safe path of conformity to the will of heaven. On the other side lay a vision of what humanity could become. Not rivals to the gods, but beings capable of fulfilling the promise sleeping within them. The potential he had placed there when first he shaped them from earth and water. As he sat beneath the stars those long nights, Prometheus made his choice quietly, without fanfare or doubt. He would become for humanity what no god had been willing to be: a true friend, a benefactor willing to risk everything for their sake. He would bring them fire, the great gift, the dangerous blessing, the spark that would change everything forever. The decision filled him with a calm certainty. He knew the consequences might be severe. Zeus's anger was legendary, his justice swift and often cruel. But when Prometheus looked down at the mortals in their patient suffering, when he heard their stories and songs rising from the darkness, he knew there was no other choice he could make. Compassion demanded action. Love required sacrifice. And so, on a night when the stars seemed to burn with unusual brightness, Prometheus rose from his vigil and began to walk the path toward Olympus, toward the sacred flame that burned eternal in the halls of heaven. His heart was steady, his purpose clear. Behind him, humanity slept their restless sleep. unaware that their benefactor was about to steal for them the most precious gift in all creation. The world held its breath in that moment between the old age and the new. Soon, very soon, everything would change. The twilight era of humanity's childhood was drawing to its close. And though they did not yet know it, down in their caves and beneath their trees, the mortals were about to receive the gift that would define their destiny, the bright, transforming, dangerous beauty of fire. Prometheus climbed through the night toward Olympus, moving through clouds that hung like curtains of mist, past peaks where eagles nested and winds whispered secrets old as stone. The mountain rose impossibly high, its summit touching the realm where mortals could not breathe, where the air itself seemed to thin into pure starlight. He knew every path, every hidden approach to the halls of the gods. He had walked these ways for ages beyond counting, had sat in council with Zeus when the world was younger, when the battle against the Titans had ended and the new order had been established. But tonight, he came not as counselor or friend. Tonight he came as a thief, moving with careful silence through the sleeping mountain. The halls of Olympus gleamed even in darkness, their walls of polished marble catching and reflecting the eternal flames that burned in golden braziers throughout the palace. Here was light and warmth in abundance, spent carelessly by beings who had never known cold or shadow. The gods slept soundly in their chambers, dreaming whatever immortals dream, perhaps of glory, of worship, of the endless tomorrows that stretched before them without fear of ending. Prometheus moved like a shadow among shadows, his feet making no sound on the smooth stone floors. He passed the great throne room where Zeus sat in judgment, past the chambers where other gods rested, their breathing soft and steady, untroubled by conscience or care. His destination lay at the heart of the palace, the sacred hearth where the eternal flame burned, tended by Hestia, goddess of home and fire, who kept it pure and bright through all the ages. The hearth room was empty at this hour. Even Hestia, that most watchful of goddesses, had withdrawn for the night, trusting in the sanctity of her charge, in the unspoken law that none would dare disturb the flame that represented the very life force of Olympus itself. The fire danced in its great bronze bowl, casting warm orange and gold shadows on the walls, crackling softly to itself. Prometheus stood before it, feeling its heat on his face, seeing his own reflection wavering in the polished metal of the bowl. For a moment, just one moment, he hesitated. This was the point of no return, the instant where thought became action, where intention solidified into consequence. Once he took the flame, once he descended with it to the world below, there would be no going back, no undoing what would be done. But even as doubt flickered through his mind, he thought of the humans in their darkness, and his resolve hardened. He reached into his robes and withdrew a hollow fennel stalk, a simple reed he had gathered on the mountainside, its interior chambers perfect for carrying a small flame while protecting it from wind. It was such an ordinary thing, this fennel stalk, such a humble vessel for such a momentous theft. With steady hands, Prometheus reached into the flame. The heat kissed his skin, but did not burn him. He was Titan-born, after all, made of sterner stuff than mere flesh. He caught a portion of the fire and carefully transferred it to the hollow reed. The stalk held the flame safely within, glowing softly from the inside, warm in his hand. He closed the reed, sealing the fire within, and straightened. The sacred flame continued to burn in its bowl, unchanged, inexhaustible. The gods would not even notice what had been taken, and yet everything had changed in that moment. Prometheus had crossed a line, had broken a law, had committed an act that would echo through all the ages to come. He turned from the hearth and began his descent, moving quickly now, knowing that every moment counted. The fennel stalk he carried seemed to pulse with secret warmth. Behind him, Olympus slumbered on, unaware that one of its greatest treasures had just been stolen by one of its own. Down through the clouds he went, down past the high peaks where eagles circled, down through the middle slopes where pine trees grew thick and fragrant. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, ancient witnesses to his crime, silent in their judgment. The moon, waning now toward darkness, shed just enough light to show the path. As he descended, Prometheus thought of Hephaestus, the smith god, whose forges burned with divine fire, who shaped wonders from metal and flame. Hephaestus, who might have understood this gift, who knew the joy of creation, the satisfaction of making something beautiful from raw materials. But even Hephaestus would be bound by loyalty to Zeus, would be compelled to act as enforcer rather than friend when the theft was discovered. The thought brought a twinge of sadness, but no regret. Some acts, Prometheus understood, required loneliness. Some gifts could only be given by standing apart from one's own kind, by choosing love for another people over loyalty to one's own. This was the price of compassion across the divide between divine and mortal. It meant belonging fully to neither. At last he reached the foothills where the mortal world began, where the air grew thicker and easier to breathe, where the first signs of human habitation appeared. A worn path, a pile of gathered wood, a circle of stones where a cold fire pit waited for flame it had never known. Dawn was still hours away. The humans slept in their caves and shelters, wrapped in rough blankets, pressed together for warmth, dreaming their mortal dreams of safety and plenty. Prometheus knelt in a clearing and carefully opened the fennel stalk. The flame had survived the journey, still burning bright and warm within its vegetable chamber. He gathered dry tinder, small twigs and dried grass, and with infinite care, he transferred the divine fire to this humble material. The flame caught. It spread from twig to twig, growing stronger, reaching upward into the night air like a living creature awakening. Orange and gold and red, it danced before him, and by its light, Prometheus saw his own hands clearly for the first time, saw the ground around him, saw the trees at the clearing's edge leap into visibility. It was done. Fire had come to the mortal world. Prometheus stood, his heart full of an emotion too complex for simple naming. Triumph and sorrow, joy and fear, love and loneliness all mixed together. He knew what would follow. Zeus's rage, punishment swift and terrible. But he also knew that this flame, now loose in the world, could never be called back. The gift was given, the transformation begun. He fed the fire carefully, building it up until it burned strong and steady. Then he moved to the nearest human dwelling and gently woke an old man who slept near the entrance, a grandfather who often watched over the others through the night. The old man's eyes opened slowly, confused at first, then widening with wonder as Prometheus led him to the clearing. Together they stood before the flame, and in the old man's face the Titan saw reflected the birth of something new in humanity, amazement giving way to understanding, fear transforming into reverence and then joy. Without words, Prometheus showed him how to feed the flame, how to keep it alive, how to transfer it to other fuel. The old man learned quickly, his weathered hands gentle with the precious gift, his eyes bright with tears of gratitude. He understood without being told that something fundamental had shifted in the night, that the world had just become a different place. As the first birds began to sing the approaching dawn, Prometheus withdrew into the shadows, leaving the old man to wake others to share the miracle. The Titan did not wait to see the gathering crowd, did not stay to receive thanks or witness the transformation he had set in motion. His work here was done. He turned his face toward Olympus once more, knowing that soon Zeus would wake, would learn of the theft, would summon him to judgment. There was no escape from what was coming, no way to avoid the consequences of his compassion. But as he walked through the lightning dawn, Prometheus found himself at peace. He had given humanity the key to their own liberation, the tool that would allow them to fulfill their potential. Whatever price he paid for this gift, it was a price worth paying. Behind him, the first mortal fire burned on, and around it, voices rose in wonder and celebration. The age of twilight was over. The age of fire had begun. The fire spread from hearth to hearth, from settlement to settlement, carried reverently by travelers who bore burning brands wrapped in damp leaves, by messengers who ran through forests with torches held high, by families who shared the gift with neighbors and strangers alike. Within seasons, the scattered communities of humanity all possessed what they had lacked since their creation: the warm, transforming blessing of flame. And with fire came awakening. The changes began simply. At first, the humans merely marveled at warmth, at the way cold fled before flames, at how circles of light pushed back the darkness that had hemmed them in since birth. Children who had never known anything but chill nights now slept soundly, nestled near fires that crackled like gentle laughter through the darkness. Elders who had suffered through countless winters now sat comfortably even when snow fell, their old bones finally at ease. But the transformation went far deeper than comfort. One morning, a woman placed meat over flames and discovered that fire changed its nature, made it tender, brought out flavors that raw flesh had never hinted at. She called others to taste, and they gathered around in amazement as cooking became, in that moment, an art. Soon, communities were roasting grains, boiling roots, baking simple breads in ashes. The act of eating, once merely survival, became a source of joy and togetherness. Families gathered around evening fires, not just for warmth, but for shared meals, for the ritual of preparation and the pleasure of taste. A young man, watching sparks rise into the night sky, began to tell stories by firelight, tales of the day's hunt, of strange sights seen on distant hills, of dreams and visions that visited in sleep. Others listened, their faces flickering in the dancing light, and added their own stories, their own songs. The fire seemed to draw words from them, to make the invisible visible, the unspoken spoken. Around flames, humanity discovered the depth of its own voice, the power of narrative to bind hearts together and pass wisdom from old to young. Another discovered that fire could harden clay, transforming soft mud into vessels that held water, stored grain, lasted through seasons without decay. Pottery was born from flame. Soon, every settlement had its skilled makers, shaping bowls and jars, each one slightly different, each bearing the mark of its creator's hands. In these vessels, people saw themselves reflected, beings who could take raw earth and transform it into something useful and beautiful. The most profound transformation came when a curious soul held a certain kind of stone, a stone heavy with metal, in the heart of very hot flames. The rock softened, melted, and from it ran a liquid that cooled into something entirely new. Bronze, then copper, then eventually iron. Metalworking was born from experimentation and fire's fierce heat. With metal came tools more durable than stone, plows that broke earth more easily, axes that felled trees with fewer strokes, needles that sewed finer seams. But fire gave more than physical tools. It gave time, time that had been lost to darkness. With torches and lamps, the night was no longer an empty void to be merely endured. In those extra hours of light, new skills flourished. Weaving grew more intricate, becoming art as well as craft. Carving and painting transformed plain objects into things of beauty. Music became more complex as musicians had light to learn and practice by. Philosophy was born when thinkers could gather after days' work to discuss the nature of things, to question and wonder and debate. Healing arts advanced as well. Herbs were dried by fires, medicines prepared in warm infusions. The sick rested by hearths, where they could be tended through long nights. Fire sterilized wounds, warmed bodies fighting off fever, gave light to those who cared for the suffering. Lives were saved that would have been lost to cold or infection. Communities grew larger and more complex. Where before humans had scattered in small family groups, barely surviving the harsh world, now they gathered into villages and towns. The shared fire became a hearth. The hearth became a center. And around centers, civilizations began their slow growth. Specialization became possible. Not everyone needed to hunt and gather. Some could focus on pottery, others on metalwork, others on healing or teaching or leading. Society, with all its complexity, was kindled in fire's glow. Yet from high Olympus, the gods watched these changes with mixed feelings. Some were amazed, seeing in humanity's rapid progress something admirable, a determination to thrive against odds. Others felt unease, even resentment. These mortals, who should have remained simple and humble, were becoming something more. They were learning, growing, building. The distance between mortal and divine seemed somehow less vast than it had been. Zeus observed in particular silence. The king of gods sat upon his throne, his brow furrowed, watching the smoke rise from 10,000 human fires. He saw how humanity multiplied and spread, how their settlements grew, how their confidence increased with their capabilities. He saw them offering thanks to Prometheus, naming the Titan as their benefactor, their friend, their savior. And Zeus's anger, which had been smoldering since the theft was discovered, began to burn as hot as any mortal forge. The god understood what Prometheus had done. Not merely stolen fire, but shifted the balance of all things. Humans were no longer entirely dependent on divine whim for their survival. They had a measure of power now, of self-determination. They could shape their world, rather than merely inhabit it. The gift of fire had made them, in some small but significant way, more like the gods themselves. This was the real crime, Zeus saw. Not the theft itself, but what it represented. The idea that mortals deserved elevation, that the hierarchy of being was not fixed and immutable. Prometheus had challenged the natural order, had suggested through his actions that compassion mattered more than authority, that love could justify transgression. Such a challenge could not go unanswered. Such a crime demanded punishment, not merely for justice's sake, but as a lesson, a warning, a demonstration of divine power and sovereignty. Zeus must show both gods and mortals that there were lines that could not be crossed without consequence, that divine law superseded even the noblest of intentions. Down on Earth, Prometheus knew this reckoning was coming. He had known it from the moment he first carried the fennel stalk down from Olympus. But when he walked among the humans now, when he saw children playing fearlessly in firelight, when he heard music drifting from illuminated homes, when he watched craftsmen shaping metal and artists creating beauty, when he saw the joy in human faces, joy that had been absent in the long twilight years, he felt no regret, only a deep, quiet satisfaction. He had given them not just flame, but possibility. Not just warmth, but the means to forge their own destiny. Not just light, but the ability to push back darkness in all its forms. The darkness of ignorance, of helplessness, of despair. Whatever price Zeus demanded for this gift, Prometheus knew it was a price worth paying. The humans, for their part, did not yet understand the storm that was gathering over their benefactor's head. They only knew that their world had been transformed, that they had been given something precious beyond measure. Around their fires each night, they told stories of Prometheus the giver, Prometheus the friend, Prometheus the wise. They poured out offerings of thanks, sent prayers of gratitude skyward, and those prayers rose like smoke into the heights where gods dwelt, where Zeus sat brooding on his throne, where justice was being prepared. Justice that would be terrible and final, that would demonstrate once and for all the cost of defying the King of Heaven. The Age of Awakening had brought humanity light and knowledge and power, but it had also brought consequences that would echo through all the ages to come. The gift had been given, the transformation achieved. Now came the payment, the sacrifice, the proof that some lights can only be kept burning through the darkest of devotions. Prometheus walked the earth in those last days of freedom, saying silent farewells to the people he had loved enough to doom himself for. And though he spoke no word of warning, though he let them celebrate their newfound capabilities without shadow of sorrow, in his heart he knew that soon he would be taken, bound, punished for the crime of compassion. But when night fell and he saw 10,000 fires burning where before had been only darkness, he felt no fear, only the peaceful certainty that comes from having done what was necessary, what was right, what was worth any sacrifice. The light would endure. That was what mattered. The light would endure. The summons came at dawn, carried by Hermes, the messenger god, whose winged sandals bore him swiftly from Olympus to the mortal realm. His face was grave, his usual playfulness dimmed by the weight of the errand. He found Prometheus on a high hill, watching the sun rise over a landscape now dotted with the smoke of human fires. "Zeus commands your presence," Hermes said quietly, his words more apology than decree. "It is time." Prometheus nodded without surprise, without protest. He had been expecting this moment, waiting for it with the patience of one who knows the story's ending before it is told. He rose, dusted the earth from his robes, and followed Hermes skyward one last time. The throne room of Olympus blazed with divine light, but the atmosphere was heavy with judgment. The gods had assembled in witness, Athena with her wise eyes downcast, Hephaestus gripping his hammer with white knuckles, Hera looking on with cold satisfaction, Apollo and Artemis standing close together in silent solidarity. All were present to see justice done, to watch as authority reasserted itself over compassion. Zeus sat upon his throne like a storm waiting to break, his eyes flashing with barely contained fury. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the hall like thunder. Prometheus, son of Iapetus, Titan who sat in council with me when the world was remade, you have betrayed me. You have stolen what was not yours to take, and given it to those who were not meant to possess it. You have upset the balance of all things, elevated mortals beyond their station, challenged my will and my wisdom. Prometheus stood before the throne, calm and unafraid. I have done what compassion demanded, he said softly. I saw suffering and had the power to end it. What use is wisdom if it refuses to act when action is needed? What value has power if it does not serve love? The words fell into the assembly like stones into still water, creating ripples of discomfort among the watching gods. Zeus's expression darkened further. You speak of love as if it supersedes order, the king said, his voice dangerously quiet now. You speak of compassion as if it excuses rebellion, but I am order. I am the force that holds sky above earth, that keeps the seas within their bounds, that maintains the separation between divine and mortal, without hierarchy, without law, without consequence. There is only chaos. There is also mercy, Prometheus replied. There is also the recognition that beings need not remain as they were first made, that growth is not rebellion, that helping others rise does not diminish those already high. Zeus rose from his throne, and the mountain trembled. You will learn that mercy has limits. You will learn that defiance, however noble its intention, cannot go unpunished. You will learn that some laws are written in the foundations of the world and cannot be altered by sentiment or sympathy. He turned to Hephaestus, who had been standing rigid, his face a mask of reluctant duty. Smith of the gods, you will forge chains that cannot be broken, and you will bind Prometheus to a rock in the far reaches of the world, where his suffering will be an eternal reminder of the cost of defying divine will. Hephaestus flinched as if struck, but he bowed his head in acceptance. There was no choice. He was bound by oath and duty to obey. But his hands shook as he turned away to begin his grim work, and those who knew him well saw the tears that he struggled to hide. The sentence was not merely binding. Zeus, in his anger, decreed further torment. Each day, an eagle would come to where Prometheus hung in chains and feed upon his liver. Each night, the organ would regenerate, only to be torn again when dawn returned. This cycle would continue without end, a punishment that could not conclude, a suffering that would know no relief. Let this stand as testament, Zeus proclaimed. Let any who think to challenge the will of Olympus, who imagine that love excuses law-breaking, who believe that mortal welfare outweighs divine decree. Let them look upon Prometheus and reconsider. They took him then, binding his wrists before the assembly. Prometheus did not struggle, did not protest, did not call upon allies for rescue. He walked willingly toward his fate, his head held high, his eyes clear and calm. As they led him from the hall, he passed Athena, and she whispered too quietly for others to hear, "Your gift will not be forgotten. Wisdom honors your sacrifice, even if power cannot." He was carried to the far edges of the world, to a desolate peak where wind howled eternally and no living thing grew. The mountains here were sharp and cruel, thrust up from the earth like broken teeth, cold and indifferent to suffering. Here, in this lonely wasteland, Hephaestus worked with tears streaming down his face, forging chains link by link, each one a masterwork of sorrowful craftsmanship. "Forgive me," the smith god whispered as he bound Prometheus to the stone. "I wish there were another way. I wish I had your courage to defy." Prometheus looked at him with compassion, with understanding. "There is nothing to forgive, Hephaestus. You act according to your nature, as I acted according to mine. We are each bound by different chains, yours of duty, mine of love. Neither of us is free, but both of us are true to what we are." The chains were fastened, the binding complete. Hephaestus departed with bowed head, leaving Prometheus alone on his rock beneath the vast, uncaring sky. Night fell, and the Titan hung in darkness, feeling the cold wind cut through him, knowing that with dawn would come the eagle and the beginning of his eternal ordeal. But as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed his theft of fire, that now looked down on human settlements glowing with warmth, Prometheus found within himself a strange and quiet joy. He had chosen this. He had known the cost and paid it willingly, and the light he had given humanity continued to burn, would continue burning long after his own torment had become so familiar as to be almost forgotten. The night deepened. The wind sang its mournful song, and Prometheus, bound and alone, discovered that there are different kinds of freedom. The body could be chained, but the spirit that had acted from love remained unbound. The flesh could suffer, but the choice that had been made, the choice to give, to sacrifice, to love beyond the boundaries of law, that choice could never be taken away. When dawn came, pale and cold, it brought with it the eagle. The great bird descended with talons sharp as sorrow, and the daily cycle of punishment began. The pain was immense, overwhelming, a tide of suffering that threatened to drown all thought. But even through the agony, even as the bird tore at him, Prometheus held in his mind an image of humanity gathering around their fires, teaching their children, creating beauty, living lives enriched by the gift he had given. It was enough. It had to be enough. The knowledge that his sacrifice had meaning, that his suffering had purchased something precious, this knowledge was the coal that remained burning in his heart, the small light that no amount of pain could extinguish. Days became years, years became ages. The rock endured, the chains held, the eagle returned each dawn, and Prometheus endured too, finding reserves of strength he had not known existed, discovering that courage is not the absence of suffering, but the will to bear it, when bearing it serves love. Seasons turned below, spring's green hope, summer's golden abundance, autumn's gentle decline, winter's stark rest, and in each season, humans lived their lives, built their civilizations, passed their knowledge from generation to generation. They did not forget Prometheus. Around their fires, they told his story, spoke his name with reverence, taught their children to honor the Titan who had loved them enough to face eternity in chains. High on his desolate peak, Prometheus heard these prayers on the wind. They came to him like distant music, like promises that his gift had not been in vain. And though his body remained bound, though each day brought fresh agony, though no rescue appeared on the horizon, still, in the deepest part of himself, he was at peace. He had chosen love over law, compassion over safety, humanity's light over his own comfort. And he would make that choice again, endlessly, without hesitation or regret. Some gifts, he understood now, cost everything, and some things, truth, beauty, knowledge, the warmth of fire in cold darkness, were worth any price. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The world continued its turning, and Prometheus, the fire-bringer, the friend of humanity, hung in his chains and endured, knowing that true gifts are given without expectation of return, that real love requires no reward beyond the knowledge that the beloved thrives. In his suffering, paradoxically, he found a kind of triumph. In his bondage, a deeper freedom than he had known in all his ages of walking unbound through the world. The chains held his body, but they could not touch what mattered most, the choice he had made, the gift he had given, the love that had driven him to steal fire from heaven. That love burned on, eternal and unquenched, a flame that no power on earth or heaven could extinguish. Time, which means so much to mortals and so little to gods, flowed onward like a river that knows only one direction. Prometheus remained bound to his rock, enduring the daily torment that Zeus had decreed, while below, on the warming earth, humanity continued to grow and change in ways both beautiful and troubling. The fire that had been gifted so long ago now burned in 10,000 forms, in hearths and forges, in kilns and workshops, in torches that lit streets of growing cities. Civilization had blossomed like a garden, tended by thousands of hands, each generation building upon what the previous had learned, each innovation sparking new possibilities. But fire, like all powerful gifts, was complex in its nature. It warmed and it burned. It illuminated and it consumed. The same flames that cooked food could destroy homes. The same heat that forged tools could forge weapons. The light that enabled learning also revealed the shadows dwelling in human hearts. Humanity had gained much, but with each gain came new questions, new responsibilities, new sorrows that their ancestors in the Twilight Age had never known. It was in this time of flourishing complexity that Zeus, still seething with anger at Prometheus but cunning in his vengeance, fashioned another gift for humanity, a gift wrapped in beauty, but carrying within it all the troubles that plenty and knowledge had not yet brought to mortal experience. Her name was Pandora, and she was created by the gods themselves, each deity contributing to her making. Athena gave her skillful hands and a clever mind. Aphrodite granted her grace and beauty that turned heads wherever she walked. Hermes bestowed upon her a curious spirit and persuasive words. She was a marvel, a being unlike any mortal woman who had come before, perfectly formed and impossibly alluring. But Zeus's gift came with a condition. Pandora was sent to Earth, bearing a sealed vessel, a great jar of clay, heavy and ornate, its lid bound with sacred cords. She was given one instruction, one prohibition: never open this jar, never disturb what lay sealed within. Pandora came to live among humanity, and they welcomed her with joy, seeing in her another blessing, another sign that the gods had not abandoned them entirely, despite Prometheus's punishment. She married Epimetheus, the Titan's own brother, whose name meant afterthought, the one who acted first and considered consequences later. He loved her immediately, deeply, without questioning what Zeus's intentions might be in sending such a gift. And for a time, there was happiness. Pandora learned the ways of mortal life, discovered the pleasure of shared meals around fire, the satisfaction of work completed, the warmth of community. But always in the corner of her dwelling sat the jar. Always it whispered to her in voices only she could hear. Curiosity, that most human of traits, that double-edged gift, burned within Pandora like a slow fever. The jar called to her in dreams, beckoned to her in quiet moments when she was alone. What could be inside? What secrets did it guard? Why had Zeus given her this vessel only to forbid her from opening it? The questions multiplied like sparks from a struck stone, each one igniting another. Days passed, then months. The prohibition grew heavier rather than lighter, the mystery more insistent rather than less. She would stand before the jar, her hands trembling, reaching toward it and pulling back, caught between obedience and overwhelming need to know. The struggle consumed her thoughts, haunted her waking hours. Epimetheus, true to his nature, had not thought to question the gift or consider its dangers. When Pandora spoke of her curiosity, he laughed gently and told her to simply put it from her mind. If the gods wished us to know what it contains, they would have told us, he said. But his easy dismissal only made the burning need to know grow stronger in Pandora's heart. Finally, on a day when Epimetheus was away and the house stood quiet and empty, Pandora could resist no longer. Her hands, as if moving of their own accord, reached for the sealed jar. She told herself she would only loosen one knot, only peek beneath the lid for the briefest moment, just to satisfy the curiosity that had become unbearable, just to quiet the voices that gave her no peace. The cords came undone more easily than she expected. The lid, which she imagined would be heavy, lifted with almost no resistance. And in that moment, that single, irreversible moment, everything changed. Out poured a dark cloud, a swirling mass of shadows that filled the room and then spilled beyond, spreading across the land like nightfall come early. From within the cloud came wailing voices, sharp edges, bitter tastes. These were the sorrows and hardships that had been kept from humanity until now. Sickness that twisted bodies and brought fever, aging that bent backs and dimmed eyes, envy that poisoned friendships, hatred that turned neighbor against neighbor, war that sent young men to early graves, famine that emptied granaries and left children crying. Out came grief and despair, exhaustion and cruelty, betrayal and violence. Out came all the shadows that had been absent from human experience, all the pains that fire's gift had not prevented, all the sufferings that would now walk hand in hand with humanity through all their generations to come. Pandora cried out in horror and tried to force the lid back down, but it was too late. The darkness had escaped and could not be recalled. It spread across the world like ink spilled in water, touching every settlement, every home, every heart. And where it touched, it left its mark, the knowledge of suffering, the experience of loss, the weight of sorrow. But as Pandora wept over what she had done, as she felt the weight of responsibility for unleashing these troubles upon her adopted people, she heard a sound from within the jar, a small voice, soft and persistent, calling to be released as well. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid once more, and out came something different from all that had escaped before. It was lighter, warmer, gentler. It did not roar or wail, but whispered like a mother soothing a frightened child. This was hope, and it was hope that had remained in the jar when all else had fled. Hope that now emerged, last of all, to dwell among humanity. Not the false hope that denies reality or pretends suffering doesn't exist, but the deep hope that persists even in darkness, that says tomorrow may bring relief, that whispers of possibility even when probability seems cruel. Hope settled into human hearts like an ember that would not be extinguished. And though humanity now knew sickness, they also knew the hope of healing. Though they knew loss, they knew the hope of new beginnings. Though they knew sorrow, they knew the hope that joy would come again. Hope did not erase the sufferings that Pandora had unleashed, but it made them bearable. It gave reason to continue when continuing seemed impossible. Pandora herself was changed by what had happened. She carried the weight of her curiosity's consequences, understood too late why some vessels must remain sealed. But she also became, in her own way, a guardian of hope, teaching others that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, that small, persistent light remains, flickering in the depths of the human spirit. High on his rock, Prometheus felt these changes ripple through the world. He sensed humanity's new sorrows, their struggles with hardships they had never before known. But he also sensed that enduring light of hope, that refusal to surrender even when surrounded by difficulty. And in that persistence, he recognized something of himself. The willingness to continue, to bear what must be borne, to hold on to what matters even when the cost is high. The gift of fire had brought humanity knowledge and capability, but it was hope that would allow them to use these gifts wisely, to persist through the challenges that knowledge inevitably brought. Prometheus understood this in his bones, in his bound body, in his suffering that had become as familiar as breath. He had endured because hope endured within him, hope that his sacrifice had meaning, that humanity would thrive because of what he had given them. Ages upon ages passed. Human civilizations rose and fell like tides. They created beauty and ugliness, wisdom and folly, love and hatred. They used fire to warm homes and to wage wars, to illuminate learning and to burn what they feared. They were, in short, fully themselves, complex, contradictory, capable of both tremendous good and terrible harm. But through all of it, through all the generations that came and went like seasons, two things persisted: the fire that Prometheus had given them, and the hope that had emerged last from Pandora's jar. These two gifts, one stolen from heaven, one released by curiosity, became the foundations of human resilience. On quiet nights, when people gathered around fires to tell the old stories, they spoke of Prometheus with reverence and gratitude. They poured out offerings, sent prayers of thanks skyward. They taught their children that the light they enjoyed had been purchased at terrible cost, that their ability to forge and create and transform their world had required sacrifice from one who loved them more than he loved his own freedom. And in speaking these stories, in remembering Prometheus, they kept alive something essential, the understanding that gifts given in love, even when they bring unforeseen consequences, even when they cost the giver everything, are still worth giving. That compassion matters more than law. That lighting another's way does not diminish one's own light, but multiplies it across the darkness. Prometheus, still bound but no longer entirely alone in his suffering, heard these stories on the wind. He felt humanity's gratitude like warmth on his face. He understood that though his body remained chained, his gift had set something free in humanity that could never be imprisoned. Their potential, their creativity, their refusal to accept darkness as final. The eagle still came each dawn. The pain still swept through him like fire. The chains still held him fast to the unyielding rock. But these physical realities, intense as they were, could not touch the deeper truth. That he had chosen well, had acted from love, had given a gift that would endure long past his own suffering. As stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, as seasons turned below in their familiar rhythms, Prometheus found himself at peace in a way that transcended circumstance. He had discovered that there are different kinds of freedom, different forms of bondage. The body could be chained while the spirit soared. The flesh could suffer while the heart remained at rest. His gift to humanity had been fire. Their gift to him, though they did not know it, was meaning. The knowledge that his sacrifice had purpose, that his suffering had purchased something precious, that his choice to love across the divide between divine and mortal had been vindicated by every fire that burned, every tool that was forged, every story that was told in the warm circle of light. And so, the tale comes to its resting place not with rescue or release, but with something perhaps more valuable: acceptance, understanding, the deep peace that comes from having acted in accordance with one's truest self. Prometheus remains bound, humanity remains imperfect, hope remains persistent, and fire continues to burn. In every hearth where flame dances, in every forge where metal glows, in every lamp that pushes back darkness, in every candle that marks vigil for the sick or celebration of new life. In all of these, Prometheus's gift endures, and in every heart that refuses to despair, that looks for dawn even in the deepest night, that holds on to hope when hope seems foolish, in all of these the deepest gift persists. The story asks nothing of you, dear listener, as you drift towards sleep. It simply offers what all old stories offer, a reminder that light persists in darkness, that courage is possible even in chains, that love given freely has a power greater than any law, and that hope, small, persistent, unquenchable hope, remains forever in our keeping, a flame that we can choose to tend or neglect, but which never entirely dies. Let these thoughts settle gently around you now. Let the image of fire, warm and steady, flicker behind your closing eyes. Let the knowledge of gifts given and hope preserved accompany you into sleep, and may you wake, when morning comes, to your own small fires, your own persistent hopes, your own quiet courage to face another day. The tale is told. The night grows deep, and somewhere, in the vast mystery of things, Prometheus endures still, bound but unbroken, suffering but serene, forever the friend of humanity, forever the keeper of the sacred flame. Rest now. The fire burns on, hope endures, and morning, as always, will come again.